Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 14th, 2020 Lebanon City Council meeting. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next we'll move on to the roll call members. Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Mike Kincaid.
Present.
Keith Campbell.
Here.
Morris Jones.
Here.
Dick Robertson.
Here.
John Copeland, absent. Brent Wheat.
Present.
And Sierra Messenger.
Present.
Thanks.
Okay, we will take up the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting and our next meeting, so we'll do two next time. I know this came to you a little late today. So first item up will be old business. This is Ordinance 2022-03. Council to consider rezone of 702, 710, 714 West Superior Street and 719 West Pearl Street. And Ben Bontrager will introduce this for second reading.
Very good. Just a real brief update. I know I unfortunately had to miss the last meeting as I was quarantining at home, but Kevin, I'm sure, did a great job of explaining the background on this. Let's see if this is on. Maybe it's not on.
It's coming. I think they're working on it back there.
So we've got a series of four existing lots that's in an area that's kind of a mix of uses. Oh, there we go. These are the four lots in question we're talking about here. This is an area where there's a mix of uses. It's all zoned general industrial, but it's a mix of both industrial, commercial, and residential uses. And this is kind of in an area where it's just transitioning from the industrial to the residential uses. So we've always felt like, and certainly because they're platted residential lots, it made more sense for this to be a residential use than an industrial use. We've had one person look at it for an industrial use, and the number of variances it was going to take to try to make it work and also meet our detention requirements. They probably would have needed about 15, 20 variances to try to make this site work. Plus, it's up against some residential lots. We really didn't think that that was an appropriate use to put there. We've had a few people look at it for a variety of residential uses, and now we've got a group that has purchased the properties and is looking to develop this with residential uses. My understanding right now is they're leaning towards looking at single-family development on this site as opposed to something like townhomes, but they're still working through that. The determination of what makes the most sense from their perspective. We have worked through this and have proposed a rezone from the general industrial land use to the traditional residential land use or zoning district. And that zoning district from a use perspective allows a variety of residential uses ranging from single family to multifamily. Again, certainly restricted by the number of units you can place there based on the lot size, but it would allow them the flexibility to look at either their idea of doing single family or townhome development there. We have worked out and go back through in terms of, there was questions at the Plan Commission on how many units that they could put there, so we did work that out with them to figure that out. If I have printed out the correct staff report. My recollection is based on the lot size and the current configuration that they could do the four lots that you see here. We are looking, you can kind of see here to the south of this property, there's this odd little extra right-of-way here that's actually associated with the old rail line as it came through here. That is not needed for right-of-way for the adjacent roadway. So we've talked to them about the possibility of vacating that little portion of the right-of-way that's directly adjacent. If we were able to get that figured out, they would allow them to do 5 lots because they'd then have enough square footage to be able to get 5 lots that meet the size requirements in there. So in terms of single family, the most you see there is 5 houses. In terms of multifamily, they'd be able to do, based on the current condition, 5 units. If we figure out, again, the square footage on that right-of-way, they would be able to do 6 units. So you'd be looking at 6 townhomes, 6 apartments, whatever the case may be. That's the maximum they could do there based on the lot size. So that would be the request that's before you here tonight. On second reading would be the rezone of traditional residential that would be establish the land uses that are permitted, and then of course the zoning associated with that traditional residential zoning classification would then regulate setbacks, number of units, etc. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions for Ben on that from the board or from the council? Okay. I'm going to do public comment after we have the ordinance read on second reading.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Ordinance 2022-03 concerns the rezoning of the property located at 702, 710, 714 West Superior Street and 719 West Pearl Street. That's more particularly described in Exhibits A and B. from general industrial zoning classification to traditional residential zoning classification. Pursuant to Indiana Code, the City of Lebanon Plan Commission conducted its required public hearing on January 18th, 2022, and voted 8-0 to send a favorable recommendation of the rezoning petition of the property and certified its recommendation to this body on January 19th, 2022. Pursuant to Indiana Code, this council has considered the application and the recommendation of the Lebanon Plan Commission and now adopts the following. Petitioner, M.E. Rental Properties LLC, is the owner of the property. The petitioner seeks to have the property that's located at 702, 710, 714 West Superior Street and 719 West Pearl Street, that's described in Exhibits A and B, rezoned from general industrial zoning classification to traditional residential zoning classification. This council has paid reasonable regard to the applicable comprehensive plans, the current conditions, and the character of the structures and the uses in the district. From and after this date, the official zoning map of the city of Lebanon shall be changed to rezone the subject property again from general industrial zoning classification to traditional zoning classification, and the Director of Planning of the City of Lebanon is authorized to change the official zoning map consistent with this ordinance.
Thank you, Rob. Any further questions or comments from council now that the ordinance has been on second reading?
No, sir.
Any public comment at this time on ordinance 2022-03? So, okay. At this time then, I would entertain a motion concerning ordinance 2022-03.
Make a motion, we approve ordinance 2022-03.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. For discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That ordinance is adopted. Okay, next up will be related to ordinance 2022-04, which is council to consider annexation of Crow Family Farm property. There is, since this is an annexation, there is a related fiscal plan resolution that would need to be adopted before the ordinance is voted on the second time. So I would ask for a motion to suspend, or consent from the council to take the agenda out of order. Do I have consent from the council?
Yes.
Consent? Okay, we have consent. So, new business then, this will be Resolution 2022-03, council to consider the fiscal plan for the Crow Family Farms annexation. Turn this over to Ben to introduce.
Thank you, Council. Mayor, this is the fiscal plan associated with the annexation that will be up for second reading right after this item. And what this does is it goes through both the costs associated with providing services to an annexation area and also then the potential assessed value changes that would take place as a result of an annexation. So again, just kind of a quick overview. The fiscal plan describes the area and the proposed zoning. It goes through the non-capital services that would be provided to the annexation area, such as police and fire protection. And then also then goes through capital improvements that are being proposed, whether they be water, wastewater services that would need to be extended or provided by the proposed developer of the property. Same thing with street construction, sidewalks, and then looks at the fiscal impact of the annexation on the city. And then I always then go to in the appendix, which is on page 12, looks at the estimated assessed value and tax rate impact as a result of the annexation. You can see here on the chart, it kind of starts with 2021, page 22, and then goes through 26, page 27. And that first column would be the estimated net assessed value of the annexed area. And agricultural property like this, when annexed, is exempt from paying municipal taxes for a period of time, unless or until it develops. You can see here, based on the proposed timeline of development by the applicant, we would first see assessed value hit the books in 2025, pay 2026. Based on their projections of construction, you would see the assessed value starting in that first year, excuse me, about $11 million, then doubling to $22 million in the following year. And it would then accelerate from then forward. And then you can see the estimated net assessed value of the city in total and estimated property tax levies based on those numbers. And they have estimated that there would be a negligible impact in terms of costs associated with the city. You have incremental increases in providing fire and police services, but they're negligible in terms of this annexation. So that's kind of the gist of that fiscal plan, and I'd be happy to answer any questions associated with that.
Any questions for Brent this time in regards to the fiscal plan as presented.
Yeah, I got one question, Ben. The fiscal plan is looking at value of what we have to provide as it stands right today. Is that correct?
It's essentially looking at the incremental increases in the cost of providing services to an annexation territory, post-annexation. So in this case, obviously, post-annexation, it's still an agricultural piece of property, so there's really no services we're going to have to provide to the annexed territory unless or until it starts to develop in the future. At that point, you kind of look at the difference between what it would cost to provide those services versus the tax revenue that would also be generated by that development. So that's kind of what this fiscal plan does. It looks at cost versus revenue associated with that, and looks at the potential impact on the city. In this case, certainly initially, with no development there's not even a home on this property right now. There is really no cost for us to provide services to that existing property the way it sits. And then it looks at the incremental increase of those costs associated with certainly going out and plowing the new streets as they're developed, providing fire and police protection to the neighborhood once it starts to develop, versus the additional assessed value and how that affects the tax levy of the city.
So we have to look at that even though it may not be developed?
Correct. Yeah, we have to look at based on what's being proposed. Certainly, if the development doesn't move forward, then we have no costs associated with providing service to an undeveloped territory. But we have to look at what's being projected to be developed on that piece of property, if and or when it does, and what those costs and revenue look like.
Because what we're doing here tonight is just voting on the annexation of a property that's owned by a single family.
Yep. Yeah. So
Correct, and we have we don't know what's going to happen to that property.
Correct. Yeah, we know that there is a potential proposal to develop this property, but all we're doing tonight is looking at the fiscal plan associated with potential development there. If it were to be annexed, and all we're doing is, with the ordinance, it will be, that's the next item on the agenda, approving an annexation. We're not approving a development. We're not approving a developer. We're not approving what they're proposing. This is merely, we've received a voluntary annexation request from a property owner, and that's what's being considered tonight.
Typically, when a property owner asks to be annexed, I've been here 14 years, we've never said no to a person that wants to be annexed into the city.
And it would, usually with 100% voluntary, I think if you look at the state statute, I think you essentially are required to annex it.
Okay.
Unless there's some really extenuating circumstances where there's significant costs associated with annexing something, and you're just not really seeing the revenue, which in most cases, that's not the case. So really, if you look at the statute, it says if you don't take action on this in a certain period of time, it will become effective without council action. So that's when it's 100% voluntary annexation. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ben, specifically about the fiscal plan resolution at this time? Any public comment on the resolution 2022-03 at this time? And if you want to kind of loop it in with the overall annexation, you can do that this time as well. It's up to the public. It is, but they'll be related though, Dick, so if they want to speak about it now, I thought it makes sense.
Okay. My name's Tony Montgomery. We live at 2174 East, 2174 100 South. We're on the back side of the railroad, kind of in the middle of the property. Probably gonna hear a broken record, but if I didn't do my due diligence, come up here and talk, I mean, I think we all know probably what's gonna happen. Not here to talk about Arbor Homes or even Hinky down the road, because I supplied every single one of them. So the big thing to me is there's some major drainage issues on this property, and obviously traffic's gonna be an issue. Where I'm located, we take everything from across to 102, which is a huge field, goes under the road, that's been there for years. I've been here 20 years. That entail runs on my property, which runs onto the proposed property we're talking about. I had to cut in a swale 800 feet or so, and the county tile's almost flat, so it hardly even runs any water towards the fairgrounds. So when this runs under the railroad onto this property, it just sits there and runs every direction, hardly even flows. It almost floods all of us. Really, if I didn't cut that swale, we'd all be flooded, really, because we take everything from across the street, and there's really nothing we can do about it. So I guess my big concern is that, hopefully everybody, this may be another board or down the road, but there's some major consideration to the drainage and traffic to this property because it's definitely a major issue. So I just wanted to make sure I proposed that because anything they do on that property, I know they've got a plan to fix that, retention ponds, whatever, but that could in turn back up and affect us even more where it's already a major, major issue already. So I just wanted to come talk about that. Hopefully everybody will take into consideration the houses all the way around this, it's a major concern already, and hopefully that's something they'll address and be considered in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any additional public comment this time?
Hey, Ben, could you address that drainage question? When you're done.
Yeah, if there's any other public comment this time. Go ahead, Ben.
Let me start by saying that we're just as concerned about drainage as the neighbors are. That's a critical item when we look at any development that would be proposed in the city. We do have a stormwater ordinance that regulates how people are required to detain water and release water into the adjacent water bodies. So that's certainly going to be a big part of the review of any development that would come forward on this property, if and or when they do, to make sure that they meet those ordinance requirements. And the big thing there is making sure that any water that's created by the development is detained in ponds in that development and then released at acceptable rates into the adjacent water bodies. What happens now is water hits that property and it sheets drains directly to adjacent properties and into creeks without being detained at all. So ideally, I'm not going to say that it will make it better, but it's not going to make it worse than what it is now, because we'll be making sure that any water that enters that site is collected by the site and is released at an acceptable rate. So that's a big part of any of our review in any development, is that we've got a third-party engineer that reviews every development, making sure that they meet all of those requirements associated with that stormwater ordinance. And I will tell you that the drainage report is often about 3 inches thick associated with that, with all the calculations and everything, so we really are looking hard at that. And then the other big piece of that is when they get to the construction side is that they're going to uncover and discover tiles all over the place out there, and we'll have to make sure that all those tiles are integrated into their system as well, so we're not affecting some of those existing tiles that are there. So there's an extensive process we'll still be going through before something gets approved out on the site to make sure from a drainage perspective and everything we're accommodating that appropriately. Now, there was also a comment about traffic. Again, we're very concerned about those things as well. One of the big things that we'll have coming up here in the next few months is a road impact fee ordinance, which was adopted last month, or a couple months ago, that will take effect in June of this year. So any new development, as those lots develop, will be required to pay a fee for adding traffic to the adjacent roads, which that money then can be used to expand roadways. So over time, we'll be collecting money from the new development that we'll be using to pay for construction and expansion of adjacent roadways. So that's a big thing for the city to have, to make sure that development pays for itself in the future from that perspective.
And also to clarify for the general public, those road impact fees cannot be used for maintenance. They have to only be used for expansion of the current system, right? So it's adding, improving intersections, adding lanes, doing things like that. So it's not just to repave a road, make it nicer. It actually has to be a physical improvement to the road network.
As an example, like on 100 South, which this will be adjacent to the existing, say, 22 feet of roadway, we can't use road impact fee money to rebuild that 22 feet. But if we need to go to 28 feet for it to be an effective cross-section, we can pay for that extra 6 feet with road impact fee money. So it definitely has to be geared very much towards expansion of roadways or new roadways as opposed to maintaining existing.
I had some input, some questions from constituents, and it's a good question. They're concerned about the density of this development, so I'm going to ask you to do what you absolutely hate to do, is predict the future and speak for decisions that have not been made by various boards. But where does this kind of fit in our overall development? Because the Heinke development will be south of there. Those are fairly high-end type of homes. Can you even comment on what we're looking at? Again, with the caveat, nothing has been decided on any of this.
Yeah, certainly nothing's been decided. Nothing's even been submitted at this point, so we don't even have a hand-drawn concept plan of what they're thinking. I do know that they have a range of product types that they're proposing here, starting with a first-time home buyer product and all the way to a move-up product. I would guess price ranges would range from around $200,000 up to probably creeping into the $400,000s with some of their upper-end product lines. In terms of overall density, I don't know yet. We're going to work through that. I know we often target kind of the mid-2s twos in terms of units per acre, so 2.5, maybe upwards of 2.6, 2.7. We'll kind of work with them on that. And then also making sure that there's a lot of open space and developed amenities that make sense for a product and a development of this size. So a lot of stuff to work through yet. We'll start getting some concept plans from them, I'm anticipating, over the next couple of months. We'll start hammering on that at that time. You'll see we probably have 10, 12, 14 different versions of a plan that we'll work our way through before we get something we're comfortable with in the planning office and working through those details. But there's certainly be more to come. Those neighbors will get additional notices when this goes back to the Plan Commission. They'll have time, they'll have an opportunity to respond to what's being proposed at that time.
And that's the main thing I wanted to hear, that there is plenty of opportunity for
Yes.
shareholder input as this thing moves down the pike, assuming it does.
This is nowhere close to a done deal.
Well, and just to reiterate, if correct me if I'm wrong, but they will still have to abide by the city standards with lot sizes and houses and the way they look per our code. So, I mean, all that still applies, correct?
Yeah, we'll still be looking through, make sure we
Right.
apply appropriate architectural standards,
Yep.
landscape standards, the standards associated with amenities, lot sizes, house sizes, and all that good stuff. We'll get into those details with them when they start coming in with plans.
Any additional questions or comments?
No, sir.
Any additional public comment this time? Okay, I would entertain a motion then concerning Resolution 2022-03.
I'll make a motion, we pass ordinance 2022 dash...
Yep, resolution.
Resolution, I'm sorry, the resolution.
Yep, we have a resolution to adopt 2022-03. Is there a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That resolution is adopted, and I will return back to our regular scheduled agenda. So it will be item B now under old business. This is ordinance 2022-04, council to consideration annexation of Crow Family Farms. I know we've talked about it. Do you want to talk about it again, Ben, or you
Yeah,
want to?
I think we kind of hit the high points on this already. This is the annexation of ordinance associated with this property. Again, it's a 100% voluntary annexation, and it involves, let me find the acreage. I had it just here a second ago, a couple hundred acres, I believe. Let me find my legal description here. I think it's about 250 acres if my memory serves me correctly. It is adjacent to existing city limits, meets all the contiguity requirements, and it will be assigned to Council District 2 upon annexation. And the Plan Commission had proposed and recommended the SF, single-family residential zoning classification upon annexation, although we do anticipate the petitioner to come back in for a PUD rezone when they're ready to, and that will go through Plan Commission and council approval processes as well.
Okay. So I'll have Rob read the ordinance in second reading, and then we'll, again, open it for public comment as well.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Ordinance 2022-04, again, concerns the annexation of certain territory that's set forth in Exhibits A and B. 100% of the owners of the parcels have filed its voluntary petition with this council pursuant to Indiana Code. The City of Lebanon Advisory Plan Commission held its public hearing at its regularly scheduled meeting on January 18, 2022, and forwarded docket 22-2 to this council with a favorable recommendation 8-0 to assign the single-family residential zoning classification for the area. This council conducted its public hearing on January 24, 2022, and this council has adopted a fiscal plan in accordance with Indiana law. Therefore, the annexation area that's generally located on the north side of 100 South, just west of 300 East, and adjacent to the existing corporate limits along the west and south boundaries of the annexation area, is declared annexed to and declared a part of the City of Lebanon. The annexation area is further to include the contiguous public highways and rights-of-ways, and it's assigned Council District 2 to become a part thereof immediately upon the effective date of this ordinance. And again, the annexation area is assigned the single-family residential zoning classification.
Thank you, Rob. The ordinance has been read on second reading. Any public comment concerning ordinance 2022-04? Please step forward. Any further discussion, comments from council for Ben or staff?
No, sir.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion then concerning ordinance 2022-04.
Motion, we approve ordinance 2022-04.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Morse. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That ordinance is adopted unanimously. Okay, that concludes what I have for old business and also what I have for new business. Is there anything from council?
Sir.
Okay, then it would move on to the claims, and we'd entertain a motion concerning the claims.
Make a motion, we pay the claims?
We have a motion to pay the claims. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Brent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Claims are approved. Any general public comment this time? Any council discussion? Announcements? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second. Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Our next city council meeting is February 28th at 7:15 PM. Have a great night.
Thank you.